welcome to another live stream, Legends. Well, guys, I mean, Bitcoin, it's nice to see that we've seen some signs of life the last few days, but I'm going to go over several reasons why I think the bulls have a lot of work to do to prove that this trend actually has any hopes of reversing to the upside. But you know what? There are a few signs, so I want to go over the good, the bad, the ugly, just kind of live analyzing several different time frames with Bitcoin, several altcoins. If you have any requests, throw them in the chat. But yeah, with that, I mean, looking at Bitcoin right now, let's just start on the 5 minute, just because obviously this is going to be the quickest scenario to play out. So I just want to go over it very quickly before getting too in depth into the mid and long term trend. But like I was just telling you guys before starting the stream here, there is technically a bearish Stuber fib here. Just the fact that we have this low and we have a lower low, that means the highest point between the two is our confirmed lower high on the trend. And basically, a lot of people like shorting into breakouts, right? That's basically why most traders fail, is because when you see this kind of price action, a lot of people take this as the sign that, hey, we need to short right now. When in reality, even if that is a bearish signal, people will still end up playing it wrong quite often because they'll panic and get FOMO when we trade into resistance levels, right? So basically the whole idea behind Stuber fibs and just Fibonacci trading in general is I like to see this market structure followed by a retracement, right? So like I said, with this being a low, this being a lower low, and actually I'm going to talk about a bullish scenario that I see as well. But just looking at that low, lower low, and like I said, confirmed lower high on the trend, that's where I want to be pulling my resistance fibs from, because it's a confirmed point of interest at that point, and basically looking for that pullback. Now, as I mentioned right before starting the stream, it is a little bit riskier now to be shorting this resistance, because this setup, the way I like to trade Stuber fibs is typically I like to take the first test of those levels before they become super obvious. But if you basically, if you kind of master a systematic trade strategy like that, I mean, obviously it jumps right out at me. So I'm ready for these levels and ready for shorting those kinds of levels. And yeah, basically we end up getting that retest of resistance, and we need to respect resistance because it's a downtrend, right, guys? We've been aggressively trending to the downside for about 4 months at this point. So anytime we see resistance with confirmed structure like this, a confirmed structure point, you know, we have to respect resistance when we get the retest of those levels. Yeah, you know, those levels do break, and it always looks like they're going to break when we get up to those levels, but I would always rather be a seller at resistance and a buyer at support, and this is no different. So like I said, the fact that it's already played out once, we tested the 786, went a little bit higher, not quite the 886, but we did hit the 0.5 fib. We never quite hit the second target, but we did hit the first scalp target there. So at that point, now that we're trading at that level again and even testing again, it just becomes more risky, right? I still don't want to long into resistance by any means, and I still am holding part of my short because basically the whole concept of taking profits along the ways is it's not only to pay yourself, but it's also to reduce risk, right? So I was able to keep a level head as we approach resistance again, because you know what? I've already taken some profits off of my position. That means that I hit my first scalp target. I have locked in a quarter of my position. That means if I get stopped out on the rest of my position, it's going to be on a smaller position. Plus I have that little bit of profit that I took out already as a cushion. So if anything, my loss would be about a quarter the size of what it would have been if I took it initially. So that's just a beautiful part of taking profits, and why I think it's so important to take profits at profit levels, right? A big mistake that a lot of newer traders make is they will have their take profit levels. They might even set, if they're good, or if they're well on their way, they'll even set an alert at your targets. But so often, and I mean, in this case, it did go down further, and it would have had a lot of time, whatever. or sorry, over here. After it hit this level, obviously it did have some time. It did push a little bit lower. But a lot of times what you'll do is you'll end up hitting your first take profit level, for example, and then just shoot right back to where you entered. And all of a sudden you missed your take profit level and you're sitting back at break even, and now you're stressed out because you don't know if you should hang on to your position or not. That's why it's so important. Anytime I take a position, I immediately have a stop loss set. I have at least 2 take profits set. Basically, the first half of my position, I have take profits set. And from there, if the remaining half of my position turns into a home run trade and absolutely takes off, then all the better, right? Absolutely fantastic. But taking profits at those levels first, just like automatically at your take profit levels, right? That's what they're for. And that's why I love trading fibs as well, is because it's so systematic. But when you hit your take profit levels, take the profit. It, like I said, not only is it locking in those profits, but it's also just helping with risk management. And that's a big thing that a lot of traders really struggle with. So at this point, I am hoping that the rest of my short does just continue to run. I'm hoping I hit my second target. If I hit my second target, the 214 fib, at that point, I will update my stop loss to break even and see what happens with the remaining half. But for now, we'll see what happens there. Bringing up the Trend Master indicator on the 5-minute as well. Something I noticed right before starting my stream. You guys know that with these indicators, it's not so much, well, those of you guys who have been in many of my streams anyways, when I use something like the Trend Master, I love using it for basically getting into scalp type of positions with like a scalp sized risk, but hoping to catch a trend sized move. And I mean, the name Trend Master says it all, right? But it's not so much that I like to take every individual signal. It's more so I really like to notice which direction these signals are trending, right? And so far you can see right here basically is that we had a buy signal. Well, first of all, I mean, we had this lower sell signal, right? That's a big warning for me. Whenever I see a lower sell signal, that means that there's a potential shift in trend. Now, obviously, it could still end up breaking out if it ends up invalidating the highs of that move. Then it's invalidated and things, you know, the bearish signal is just gone, right? But at this point, we had a lower sell signal, beautiful short signal there. And then we got another lower sell signal, beautiful short signal. And to go with that as a little bit of confluence is we have the lower buy signals, right? We had this lower buy signal. We have a slightly lower buy signal. So again, these indicators are still trending to the downside. So that's a trend that I don't really want to fight that indicator at this point. And the fact that it still has lower trending sell signals and it actually lines up with my fib pull here that we get our lower sell signal. This is where we topped out before getting that. So it kind of lines up here that at this point, if we end up invalidating this, we end up breaking past this resistance, then yeah, at that point, I would expect that this buy trend from the MDX Trend Master would end up holding as beautiful support. And at that point, we might end up staircasing higher. And basically, as we staircase higher, that's basically where I can start looking for, basically, as we set a higher high, then I can start looking for those bullish Stuber fib pullbacks, right? Because if we have a high here, this is obviously theoretical, looking into the future. But if we end up invalidating this bearish setup, we have this new high. If we set another higher high, then we can start looking for those bullish fib pullbacks, right? Just like the opposite of the short that I'm in right now is then I would just be looking at playing the uptrend, because if we have higher highs, that means we have confirmed higher lows on the trend to pull our fibs from. So that's what I would be watching for from a bullish perspective. But right now, resistance is resistance until it's broken. So AI charting tools, let's just see if this pointed out any obvious pivot points. So this does actually still have our higher highs, confirming higher highs with this indicator. But yeah, that's just one thing. What's the bot master saying? Bot master is probably saying long right now. But that being said, yeah, they are higher trending buy signals on the bot master as well. So there is some validity to that. But I always look at price action first, and I look for indicator confluence second, basically. So at this point, I still just don't want to fight this trend until we end up taking out one of those lower highs. That being said, like I said, there is a potential bullish scenario here. It technically has already played out, but we might see another one. Again, I'm going to microanalyze a little bit, but let's just put that low, that first low, like I said, we set a lower low. Technically, if we microanalyze, we set a couple lower lows, right? We set a lower low. That would have confirmed this as our lower high. Then technically we did set a slightly lower low. Highest point between the two would have been this guy right here. And since we broke that, it is possible that there is some momentum for this setup. Now, I just actually want to check if this was a valid Stuber. It may have already got... So, yeah, there technically was one there, right? We end up breaking that structure, microstructure. Eventually, we end up topping out, coming back down to the 786. Absolutely beautiful entry there. Now, I myself, I never did take that long position, but just showing you that, you know, these setups, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and that's exactly why I always say that market structure is market structure, you guys. Whether you see it on the 5-minute, the 1 hour, the 4 hour, the daily, the weekly, the 1 minute, you know, market structure is market structure, and I generally treat it all the same. And that's exactly why I have an issue with Bitcoin, is because as far as the long-term trend, because I still really think that as far as the full-on cycle, I think we are in a bear market. And I just personally think that it is going to bottom out around a Stuber fib. That's why I still think that there's a chance Bitcoin ends up dropping to 40K. Now, it's not like I've sold all of my spot. It's not like I'm not going to buy a thing until we get there. I'm DCAing pretty much every day since we have pulled back so much. But I'm totally okay with us ending up dropping that much further. And I'm willing to look at this lower time frame structure and consider, you know, is it possible we go much lower? Should I still be bearish? I mean, yeah, I don't think this move has finished playing out yet. It is possible that we get a very strong bounce, trick a lot of people, and then continue to the downside. But I really don't think that the lows are in for this cycle yet. And as you can see here, I also have timelines mapped out here, basically from when each market cycle has bottomed. It's been, the last couple anyways, have been exactly 204 weeks. So although people are saying that the 4-year cycle is broken because of the yearly candles not lining up and stuff, that's because it isn't exactly a 4-year cycle, right? It's actually a few weeks off, or a couple anyways. Or wait, what, 4? Oh God, my math. Anyways, but yeah, it's not exactly 4 years. Yeah, sorry, 4 weeks off of a 4-year cycle. So a lot of people have that wrong, in my opinion. And a lot of people are also saying that, well, since gold and silver and the stock market, you know, those are all at all-time highs, and Bitcoin is going to follow. Bitcoin is lagging behind, and Bitcoin is going to do what gold and silver did. Guys, understand that the reason people don't think Bitcoin had a nice bull market is because most people weren't paying attention to it until the media told them to, when we were already back above all-time highs or back at 100K or whatever. But realistically, Bitcoin pumped over 700% before gold moved, before silver moved. Basically, it was the front runner, if you ask me. Everyone, I personally think everyone has that backwards, saying that Bitcoin is going to follow those assets, and I think those assets have followed Bitcoin, and that's just a theory at this point. Obviously, very happy to be wrong about that. I mean, if my bags go absolutely parabolic, I would love to see it, but I like to look at things as a realist, and more so let the charts do the talking. If all these fundamentals that are screaming that, no, this has to be bullish because of whatever fundamentals and whoever's running the show and all that sort of stuff, if any of those things matter, the chart structure will show that. And all the chart structure has been showing for 4 months has been just devastation. You know, and guys, that's coming from someone, I know a lot of people are blaming October the 10th. That totally destroyed the market. Well, it was right on schedule, right? I mean, if we look at all-time highs, what was that? We ended up getting about, what was it, 205 weeks from all-time high to all-time high. What was the next cycle? Yeah, right at about 205 weeks is when we end up breaking a bunch of structure to the downside. So if you ask me, everything was just basically right on schedule. Let's actually check this cycle as well. That cycle high to this cycle high. Actually, very slightly off. It's actually closer to 210, 211, but kind of right in that time frame, right? So the exact same as the last market cycle. So like I said, I think everything was just right on schedule for a typical bear market. And the fact that you guys, well, many of you guys will remember there was actually a live stream here. Actually, it was the day before. It was October 9th. And I said that I was expecting much lower prices. And I actually ended up taking a short at 125.2K. And my reasoning wasn't because I knew anything was crazy was going to happen. I didn't know there was tariff announcements. I didn't know there was any of that. I was literally just looking at this as a potential swing fail zone while retail longs were above 70% or even close to 80%. I can't remember. While we were trading into all-time high resistance, I mean, it was just begging to get rejected. So I would always rather be a seller at resistance rather than longing with leverage into resistance. The FOMO was crazy, but I mean, everything was screamed from a charting perspective. It was looking like we were about to see some sort of a correction. I didn't think it was going to happen as fast as it did. I thought that 3-hour move was going to take a month or two, but it was in the charts if you ask me. So the fact that we had that swing fail, even if I just want to go from that resistance point, let's even get rid of my fibs here, just so you can see how clearly it got rejected, right? When the candle closed below it. Right, it never did get a candle close above our resistance here on the weekly, and I think the 4-hour and the daily actually looked similar. But so we had that swing fail on a macro time frame. Since we could technically say, even though it's just a wick, we have this high, we have these higher highs, confirmed higher low, we lost that structure as well. Another level that we lost, so we had a swing fail, we lost horizontal structure, and we lost diagonal structure. Very clean too, right? Very clean touch points of this support line. And then when we ended up breaking it, even when we broke it, right? We basically just came and retested that old support as new resistance and got rejected very swiftly. And since then, what do we have? Well, obviously a significantly lower low. And since that, we obviously smashed through that low. So we have a lower low. So on the weekly time frame, we actually have a confirmed lower high around 98.4K. So that leads me to my other point that I made earlier, that I think it is possible that Bitcoin does get some sort of a very strong bounce, and that would drive serious FOMO if we end up getting close to that 100K. I mean, guys, we bounced for about 2 hours and everybody was celebrating that the bottom was in. If we end up getting close to 100K again, people are going to be screaming how bullish we are right as we end up trading into resistance. So if, and that's a big if, we end up getting a strong bounce, just again, like I was talking about before, we're in a strong downtrend. At least respect resistance if we end up retesting it, right? If you're in some longs from down here, whether it's down here or up here, or you find some along the way for whatever reason, right? I'm not here to judge, because obviously, even if we're in a bearish macro trend, there's plenty of long opportunities in the market. But just if we end up getting up to these resistance levels, just be careful if you're planning to long with leverage into that very strong resistance, right? That's more so the kind of level where I would be looking at it as, you know what? I'm in a nice long. It's time to lock in a bunch of the profits because we are at potential very strong resistance, rather than getting FOMO and longing into it, right? Or starting to build some hedge short positions, or just looking to be a seller in general as we are testing macro resistance, basically, just like I was up here. It's not, I even said in one of my posts when I had posted that I was taking the short at 125.2K, I even said I wasn't bearish. I was simply taking that as a sell level because we were at resistance and looked like we were getting rejected. That's the only reason I took it. From a risk reward point of view, I'd always rather be a seller at resistance. That was literally the only reason. And yeah, it ended up being the top. I wish I still had that position. I accidentally closed it, or the rest of it. I think it was somewhere in the 900% or something like that. It was absolutely huge. It was a beautiful trade. But I wish I would have just left a little bit open as a trophy position, because that absolutely nailed it. But that being said, don't have that one open. Like I said, I do still have a 5% of my short running from 89.9K. And speaking of that, let's jump into the 4 hour. Let's get into the midterm time frames here. Like I said, guys, it was just basically a very typical Stuber fib was the reason why I ended up taking this short. Actually, the trend master had something to do with it too, if I remember correctly. But basically the structure that we had this wick as a low. We set a lower low. That confirms our highest point between the two as our lower high on the trend. Everyone started celebrating how bullish we were and how we were going back to all-time highs right as we traded into resistance. That's where I took my short and still have some of that running. But there was nothing crazy about that setup. It was literally just, hey, we had a low and a lower low, pull a fib from our lower high. And yeah, it was just obvious resistance level. So if we also bring up the trend master, like I said, price action first, but looking at indicators second, basically for confluence, is we also had this sell signal on the MDX trend master. So even though we got above it briefly, it's not like it flipped into a buy signal or anything like that. We just went slightly higher to test the actual Fibonacci resistance. But in general, I mean, this would have been a fantastic short as well, shorting along that indicator. So that was just nice confluence to have with that. And at the time, I don't know if it's going to show, but yeah, there was basically a bunch of liquidity left down here. So it looked reasonable to expect that that could happen. Speaking of liquidations and liquidity, basically, actually, first I want to just look at the naked price action, no indicators here. So basically, my main 4 hour range is between this red resistance and this green support. And you guys probably know where I'm going with this, but this was my low because we got a bounce there. Our next bounce didn't come till here, so that's our lower low. Highest point between the two right here. So we have our 4 hour lower high resistance sitting right around 77K. So for me to be bullish, I need this level broken. And we got stopped shy about 5,000 US dollars below that, while everyone's claiming the bottom's in, celebrating all this stuff. We haven't even gotten close to the resistance retest yet. So I think it's absolutely possible that we do still end up going up there. I know someone had mentioned earlier would love to see a rally to get into a better short, so maybe we end up seeing something like that, right? It's possible that we do trend a little bit higher because our main resistance doesn't really start for me until about 73.3K, and that runs to about 79.6K basically. So unfortunately, when it's real volatile like this, those ranges, yeah, invalidation is far away, and that's why I prefer to ladder into positions. And in this case, since it's a bigger range, it would obviously be lower leverage if that's the approach I took. Realistically, I would be more so looking for lower time frame setups when we start getting into the longer time frame zones, basically. So if we get into 4 hour resistance, that's where I'd be really excited to start looking for 5-minute bearish Stuber fib setups, for example. So from there, that's the main range that I am looking at. But we do have this mini range inside that range. So again, typical structure, right? We had our high, higher high, confirmed higher low. We ended up breaking that. That confirms this as my bearish pivot for this smaller little micro trend. But after that, we obviously set a couple lower lows, lower low, lower low. Here is the lower high between the two. We end up breaking that, thus confirming this as a bullish reversal. So at this point, we're kind of stuck in a smaller range between these two white lines. But still, even if we break above this, I wouldn't necessarily consider us bullish for the long term. For the midterm, yeah, sure. But for the long term, it's that 77K level that I need to see broken. I still personally think that we'll end up retesting support near the bottom of this range. So basically, as it stands right now, since this is the bottom of my range, this is where we've topped out so far on this little rally. I would have a fib pulled something like this. So I'd basically start looking for support at 62.6K approximately. And then there's also a swing fail territory from basically 59.9 down to about 58K. Would be something like that. So I would actually be more bullish. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'd be more open to the idea of a strong bounce from these levels down here, just because it would be a proper support retest of the main support that we found so far. One thing to consider is it wouldn't actually be a legit Stuber fib, because the fact that we haven't broke lower high structure yet, that pullback, it would be a pullback to potential Fibonacci support. It just wouldn't meet my criteria for an actual Stuber fib setup. So in that case, if I was looking to long these support levels, I would likely end up trading it with a smaller position size, just because I would be missing that extra confluence of the structure broken, basically, right? So that's kind of what I'm looking at on the 4 hour. Let's actually see what the Trendmaster is doing at these levels. So ever since up there, this is just a nasty, nasty downtrend here. Still respecting this indicator as resistance. So that's a little extra confluence why I think that the bulls have a lot of work to do at this point. What about volume delta? Let's see where... nothing really crazy jumping out at me right now. Liquidations. Let's see where there is some liquidity. So something to consider from a bullish perspective. Actually, sorry, getting ahead of myself again. I never mentioned that after we ended up breaking this microstructure here, like I said, when we confirmed this as a bearish pivot, notice where we ended up getting rejected on this little rally that we had right in that Stuber fib pocket. So even though it's not the main range, it still did happen. But one reason why I think it's possible we do see a bit of a bounce here is obviously just the opposite, right? If I end up pulling a fib from our support here, you know, whether or not we're bullish, we are technically at a potential support level. It's just that if we end up losing these lows, that's where I'd expect us to test the bigger support levels, basically. So bringing back that liquidity, does it make sense that basically either scenario could happen? One thing to consider is these support levels that I mentioned down here, starting in this purple box around 62.6K. Notice there is a bunch of liquidity down there, right? There is a bunch of liquidations down here. Now it is lower leverage stuff. I believe the blue lines, I think it's 5 to 10x leverage. Whereas the stuff to the upside, there is higher leverage liquidation levels. Now, typically those are much easier to grab, and therefore sometimes the market maker will end up grabbing that high leverage liquidity first. But we can't trade specifically just off where the liquidations and the liquidity are sitting, right? Because either way, even though it's lower leverage stuff down here, there is still that liquidity there. So, but it is interesting to note that if we do go to the downside, there isn't a ton to grab, right? Basically down to that support level I mentioned. Obviously, some may end up forming down there as people start if people start trying to long that dip. But it is interesting to see that a bunch of those liquidations line up right with my purple box there. So at that point, if there isn't a ton of liquidity down below anymore at that point, I would expect some sort of a bounce off that support. And also something to watch for that would be basically with the MDX ALGO going into the retail long short indicator as well. If we end up basically coming back down to these support levels, and then we see retail start building shorts heavily, at that point, if retail is trying to short into support, I would expect that we get a very nice bounce at that point. However, if retail wises up and tries to actually long support, that would provide the liquidity needed for a bit of a long squeeze where the market maker could end up pushing us through that support using that liquidity and wrecking the market again, basically. So something else to watch for there. let me catch up on the chat here. I will absolutely check out Zcash in a little bit here. I have a couple more things I want to look at first, and then I'll dive into some altcoin requests. Do I have a standard ladder of TP percentages? Yes. Or do you decide how much you'll TP depending on the strength of the trade? So typically speaking, I take a quarter of my profits at my first fib target. I take another quarter at my second fib target. So generally speaking, that would be the 0.5, right? In a case like this, shorted here and took a quarter there. Never did get my other quarter yet because we never did end up testing my second target, so I'm hoping I do. But at that point, I would only have half the position still running. So I'm pretty structured with the first half of my position. Generally, it's at, you know, a quarter at the 0.5, a quarter at the 214. From there, I'm a little more flexible, right? At that point, my stop losses break even, and I just basically take profits as I feel like it on the go, usually just taking 5 or 10% at a time. And that depends just how I feel, or if I zoom out and let's say there's important levels, or let's say, let's just pretend this is obviously make-believe, but let's say I shorted this one. I will show that in a second because that's obviously a Stuber setup as well. But in a case like this, if I had a nice short running at this point, the fact that we ended up breaking that microstructure I was talking about, if we got a break like that, I would likely end up taking some more profits off my position just because there is a warning sign at least. Like I said, guys, earlier in the stream, that these Stuber fibs, I mean, you start to see it. Once you start to see them, you just can't unsee them, and you see them in all sorts of shapes and sizes. But like I was just, that one caught my eyeball right there. What do I mean by that? Is if we basically pull a fib from here to where we ended up losing this structure here, right? Pull a fib down to there, and look where we ended up topping out. Obviously, that's a very small range, so your first couple of take profits are very close. They happen very quickly, and they're not huge profits. But at that point, you're in a risk-free position, and it did turn into a nice running position, right? So plenty of profit to be made for very minimal risk on that kind of a setup. And honestly, even here, same thing, right? At this point, lose this guy here. Obviously, it's a much smaller one, or very small as well. But again, notice where we come up to. We get that retest. We lose structure. We retest the 786, 886. It actually played out twice, right? We ended up getting this guy. First target, second target. End up getting it again. First target, second target. See what happens from there. Once you see them, they just start jumping out at you. I would have loved... I would have loved to pull one from here, but not so much because we never quite got above this guy here. If we would have just played out slightly different, if we would have went something like that, then we would have lost that higher low between the two, and in that case I would be pulling a fib from this high, but it's just not quite perfect. Very close. Right, there is still technically, we did lose that level, so it depends how picky you want to be or what your risk appetite is like, but very close to a little guy there. But this is the one that I was interested in. Slightly bigger. Right, and everyone has their own trade strategies, right? Some people like to really microanalyze and get into those very small ranges and just get all scalpy. I myself included, I really like getting into those scalp positions because if they turn into a runner, then it was a very small risk involved on the trade. And if it turns into a runner, then it's a huge risk reward, right? Sometimes you can get into those 10 to 1 or even 20 to 1 risk reward setups if the structure just forms just right. Obviously, you need the stars to align a little bit. But, yeah. Bitcoin dominance is something I wanted to check out as well, you guys, just for the health of the altcoin markets before I start diving into some altcoins. I have mixed feelings about this right now. One thing, and for those of you unfamiliar, typically in a healthy market, you actually want to see Bitcoin dominance drop in, because that means that basically focus is off the lower risk crypto. I know it's kind of weird saying that crypto or that Bitcoin is not high risk, but just as far as the crypto space goes, if dominance for Bitcoin is dropping, that's generally a good sign of strength, because that means that, you know, people are willing to move that money around. They're getting into the riskier assets basically, and that's where you start to see altcoins do very nicely. Now, my concern with this chart right here is that we have obviously are testing a typical Stuber fib support on the daily time frame on the Bitcoin dominance. So it is possible, and if this ends up finding strong support and rallying to the upside, that could be a sign of weakness in the market, where Bitcoin as well as altcoins end up getting absolutely hammered. That being said, when I bring up some indicators like the Trendmaster, we ended up losing this buy signal, right? I would be basically looking at this little support here as being our support for that buy signal. We did technically drop below that and still have a sell signal here. So that is a little bit of a sign of weakness on this chart, which is ironically bullish for the market. But that is one thing. So honestly, feeling mixed signals about that right now. And that's how I generally feel about the market right now. I'm still very comfortable getting in and out of positions and that sort of thing. But as far as where I think the market is heading in general, I have mixed feelings, because like I said, I have all those reasons on the weekly why I think that Bitcoin is absolutely ruined and we're going to go significantly lower. But another thing with that to consider is with the RSI. We are in that oversold territory on the weekly. Now, if this was any other time frame, I would say that generally if you're in a downtrend and you enter oversold territory, that actually just means there's a ton of strength for the bears, right? Relative strength index. Typically speaking, though, on the weekly, that has marked a bottom or close to a bottom, right? Over here, that was right before the FTX collapse. But notice we did go oversold, and we did end up pushing a little bit lower, but we got a nice bullish divergence. So even if we are oversold, we still can go lower. And if we ended up getting some sort of a bullish, let's say we see the RSI do something like this, I would get actually quite bullish at that point if we got a very nice and that specific bullish divergence on the RSI. I think that would be a great sign that, well, likely for me at that point, I would think the bottom's in. But at this point, the fact that we are oversold, yeah, you know, the bottom's probably getting close, but we still could end up pushing. And especially if we do need to end up hitting that 786 before finding bottom like previous cycles. And you know how I trade the 5 minute, how I trade the 4 hour, how I trade every time frame, and looking at the weekly the exact same, it's still very possible we end up getting that Stuber retest basically. We will have to see. Happy to go either way. If we go parabolic, great. My investments, my moon bags, my altcoin holdings, they're going to be very happy. If we end up dumping down to these levels, and it's what I've been talking about as a possibility since over 100K, then at least I'm ready for it, and I am crushing the downtrend, right? I love shorting Bitcoin. I think there's a special feeling to making money when the whole market's in panic mode, and you know everyone's looking for reasoning and justifying why they got wrecked and all that sort of thing. And you can just look at it and say, well, the charts predicted this. I kept my emotions out of it and shorted it, and you know what, it's like I said, just a special feeling there. Let's start getting into some altcoins though. Solana. So Solana, obviously, well, you can see what I have mapped out there, is very similar structure to Bitcoin, except Solana actually did reach that fib pocket, right? If I go to Bitcoin, that would be this guy pulled from this fib right here. And we obviously never did quite end up getting up to that 786, 886. So Solana actually did end up getting there. It got rejected, but at least at this point, it may have played out, right? The fact that we ended up at least hitting the 0.5 fib target. Still possible that we come down and test the 214 target. Hell, it's still possible that we just end up getting sent to new lows because we are in a downtrend unless we end up breaking basically $94.60. If we end up breaking that level, that's where I'd be interested in long in support basically. But at this point, it is a little risky. Just like Bitcoin had on the 4 hour though, there was this mini range. Technically getting a bounce right off that 786 there, but we're about halfway to the first target already. I would still always prefer the bigger setup, getting a retest of the actual bigger support, but you know, there's at least potential support right there. What is the Trendmaster saying for old Solana on the 4 hour? Well, just like Bitcoin, just ugly resistance. Yeah, that has been quite the sell signal and just absolutely devastated and still holding the price down as resistance there. So no real signs of recovery quite yet on the midterm. Looking at hype, I think I actually mapped this out on our last stream exactly a week ago. What day would that have been? That would have been on the 12th. Yeah, I totally mapped this out last week. Basically looking at market structure for hype has seen a very nice bounce basically ever since filling the wick from October 10th, right? We basically came down, filled the wick, reclaimed, kind of lost and reclaimed that level as support. Absolutely beautiful buy signal with that little fake out there, little swing fail, if you will. And obviously broke some structure, right? Broke lots of structure levels. And from there, basically the most recent one would be, this was our high. Very clean, actually. Higher high. Because there was no chop in between. There was no pause, nothing like that. Just a straight up high, higher high. Therefore, we have a confirmed higher low. And therefore, I have my fib pulled like this. Now, it actually got close to the 0.5 fib once already, but it never actually did hit a target. So we'll have to see if this holds. As far as a new trade on hype, I would say it's way more so a buy level rather than a sell level. However, understand that if we end up taking out these lows here, we may end up testing the bigger support, right? Basically, my next support would be looking at from where we bottomed so far. And I'd be looking at that kind of a fib pull. But so far, on the immediate trend, that is still valid support just because we never did lose that higher low. Stu, what you're saying about the 4 hour, not a perfect fib. Not all fibs get accomplished perfectly, right? Because what I see now is we don't have volume. That makes me bearish. Honestly, I don't watch volume as much as I probably should. I think it's just another thing that can be misanalyzed. But not to say it shouldn't be used. I think if used properly, it's actually very good. But 4 hour, not a perfect fib. Sorry, I know you said that a while ago, so I'm not sure exactly which one you'd be talking about. This one? I can't remember now. Alt F for oh. Aha, Alt F to get the fib so I don't have to click there. Yeah. So many hotkeys to know. What was, I know someone made an altcoin request earlier. Zcash, that's what it was. Zcash on the 1 hour. I can absolutely take a look at that. Well, if it comes back to you, absolutely shoot me a message and I'll give you my 2 cents. But yeah, not all fibs end up playing out perfectly, and if there's some chop, that can kind of affect them a little bit. There is some moving parts when pulling the Stuber fibs for sure. Zcash. 1 hour, you say? Oh, that one's... it's messy. What I'm looking at is messy. I don't have a strong opinion about this just because of how it formed. Obviously, I would like to say, hey, here's our lower high, and therefore we are trading at resistance, right? Something like that. Even filled basically hit the 886 almost perfectly there. The one reason why I don't know how I feel about that one right there is just because of how and guys, this is very micro analyzing. I'm going to be picky here, but obviously we had a lower low here. That's where we confirmed this as our lower high, but obviously at a lower low, which would have confirmed this as our lower high, and technically another lower low. Therefore, this would have been our lower high. So we did break some very micro structure, but it's so choppy and ugly, it's just not clean. So there's a good example of not a perfect not a perfect range. But that being said, if we end up getting a pullback here, let's say we do get rejected at this resistance, there's potential support down here. Again, I do not have a strong opinion about this one just because of how this structure formed. If we go on the 5 minute, it's probably a lot more clear. Yeah, much clearer on the 5 minute, because I would say, okay, here we have a low, we have a lower low, lower high, boom, that was broken. Pull the fib chasing the price just like we have here. So yeah, there's potential support here. Basically starting down at around $256.10, going down to about $251.30. That's if we see that pullback. And let's take a look at the 4 hour. Four hour has some ugly structure, but it could end up getting a significant bounce and remaining bearish, just because same thing, micro analyzing, high, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. We ended up losing that. So the 4 hour trend since pivoting down here was broken. So basically two different ways that I see Adrian, welcome, brother. A couple different scenarios that I see for Zcash that are a little more clear than that micro trash I was looking at. One from a bullish perspective would be if we end up just dumping from here, then we have potential fib pull from our lows back here at about $184. So we have that fib pull where we could see potential support basically starting around 217 US dollars down to, oh, that's a big range, down to about 162. On the opposite side of things, if we end up going to the upside first, resistance to watch for would be pulling a fib pull from our highs here. And if this is where the price decides to bounce, start being careful around 315 US dollars. If the price ends up going down, then we can just kind of chase the price and wait to see when it ends up retesting this fib pocket, basically. Let's see if any... Yeah, it does look like a nasty little resistance level there. Be careful with that one. Like I said, this microstructure is really choppy and a little bit messy in here. But as far as structure goes, yeah, there's resistance there to watch for. But if we end up smashing through it, it's absolutely possible that we retest the tops of the highs of the range, right? So be careful. Let's bring up the Trendmaster indicator. And there's added confluence to that resistance level, bang on. On top of that, guys, it is a lower sell signal. So although that move, obviously that's where it would have printed. So, I mean, it's already down 5.5% from there. Actually went down about 8.5%. But we do still have that potential resistance, and the fact that it lines up with that horizontal resistance as well, it's a little bit of confluence. So I definitely wouldn't be a buyer at this level. I'd rather wait out the storm, see if we end up building some sort of lower time frame structure down at this support pocket, and if not, like I said, I think it's very possible we retest some lower support levels. Yeah, tough to say. Yeah, your Inge call there was nice. Let me take a look at Inge. Was a thing of beauty. Where did... trying to remember. Did you pull from here? Or was it here? Or did you just trade on something else? Either way, that was a beautiful little Stuber fib pull right there. And then since then, we obviously set a higher high. So if we pull... oh, that's funny. So we had this high, higher high, therefore confirmed higher low. So after we already got this long call from this fib pull, we ended up getting another one here, and it's already played out. It played out very fast, obviously, because we hit the 786, hit the 0.5, and the 214. $20.99. Oh, $20.99. Sorry, $2.99. Holy. We're both struggling. Nice. $2.99 right about there. And $2.93.4. Didn't even go that low on my chart for Blowfin. Oh, that was your stop loss. Oh, nice. Perfect. I assume you've locked in some profits along the way already. Looks like, well, at least for me, it would have hit a couple targets, and I assume, getting back to the top of the range there, perfect place to take some profits. Big time. Perfect. Love to hear it. Speaking of never willing to take profits, should I look at our favorite meme coin here, Troll? I will never take profits. Just kidding. It needs to get into profits first. But Troll looking decent. It did find this nice little Stuber fib so far, but obviously that little range has played out a couple of times. But it does look like it's tapping away at resistance. And if this thing goes, and guys, I want to be clear about something before I even zoom out. Meme coins, and specifically low cap meme coins, because this would be about, what, a $16 million market cap, I think. Meme coins are very dangerous. Many of you guys know that already. Many of you guys learned the hard way. Some of you guys learned from other people's mistakes. But yeah, these things, they go through entire market cycles very quickly, right? They will go through an entire bear market in like a matter of a few weeks, basically. But yeah, in this case, I mean, we are back near our main support. And kind of looks similar to last time where, it's not like it just kind of looks like we're forming a rounding bottom. Like the sell-offs are getting smaller. We're consolidating in a very tight range. All it's really going to take is, you know, breaking a little bit of market structure, and something like this could get extremely volatile very quickly. I say that as someone who was buying this back at the original Stuber fib. I got myself into, I loaded up on my position in this zone back here, and all of a sudden it broke some main resistance levels and absolutely took off, and caught about a 25x on that, took some profits on it, kept some running, and have a much bigger bag now because I've been dollar cost averaging into this one with some Bitcoin shorting profits and just DCAing in general. Just kind of constantly buying a little bit of this guy. As far as meme coins go, I think that one might stick around for multiple cycles, so we'll have to see. But obviously it's high risk, like any meme coin. Just assume they're going to zero and you'll be fine. Don't throw risk management out the window in the meme coin market, because that is a one-way trip to wrecked city. Check out Truth. Actually, I want to leave this chart up. What ooh, that's a nasty looking 4-hour chart. Am I looking at the right one? I assume so. That's nasty. I mean, to be fair, it's back at support. Never even got the bounce to the 0.5 fib. Ooh, that is rough. Truth Social from Trump. It says Swarm Network. Is that right? I mean, from what you're describing, it looks right. Yeah, well, I mean, wouldn't be the first time that one of his coins has totally wrecked his followers. Just for you, Adrian. I was so mad at my bot for frickin' going long on Trump coin. I only short this. But to be fair, we are at that Stuber fib level that I must have mapped out last week with you guys. I don't remember when I mapped this out. Must have been last Thursday. Yeah, I need to turn it to short only. Yeah, well, that sounds about right. But yeah, looking at Trump coin, pulling a fib from there. Obviously, that's where I got my purple box there. So technically at potential support. Let's see what the lower time frames are doing. There is that potential super support on the 5-minute as well. The one thing to consider there is obviously it's already played out. Actually, several times, right? Once, twice, thrice. But yeah, it looks like it wants to push higher. To be fair. I'm going to guess that I know what the trend master looks like on this thing, but yeah, we are trading right at support. Basically, how long has this thing been running short? Oh boy. Remember when I was talking about lower trending buy and sell signals? That is a lot of juicy short calls on that downtrend. Nasty. To be fair. Anyways, legends. Ooh, look at that, a buy signal on the 5 minute. It's a higher buy signal even. Still have lower sells. There's a bit of conflicting stories there on the Trendmaster right now, but it is, you know, that higher buy signal. I'll give credit where credit is due. There might be a little push. Yeah, anyways, legends, I think that's about all I wanted to go over today. So hopefully you found this stream useful. If you guys do have any further questions, I'm totally happy to stick around. If there's no quick questions, I will end the stream, but I will still be around for a little bit, you guys. I will still be here, so if you just want to chat, hang out, whatever, I will be here. I just want to basically stop the recording. Thoughts on Aster? I will take a look at that first. Looks like it's getting toppy, but I can't say that the structure is toppy. It broke the lower sell signal. Right, we had... let me just clean things up. I haven't looked at this chart in a while. But, so basically, since it launched and did its first initial pump, it's been lower sell signals and lower buy signals ever since. Just a beautiful downtrend, really. Very clean when you're looking at it with the MDX Trendmaster here. Lower sell signal, every one being a juicy short opportunity. But interesting that this is the first time that we've invalidated one. So this buy trend that we just ended up reclaiming, that might hold some weight. If we ended up losing this support, I would want to end up cutting my losses quick if I was taking a long on that. And at that point, basically, if we end up losing the buy signal trend, that's where I would start looking for a bullish fib, though. It does look to me like, you know, the fact that we invalidated that level there, that's a good sign in my opinion. So if we, I don't know, oh, that's a tough one. I'm tempted to take a bit of a long on this with a tight stop loss. But if that gets invalidated, I think it's very possible we come retest support, even if it remains bullish, right? There's still bullish signs, but that doesn't mean we can't retest support, basically. So I wouldn't really want to sit through the position for this entire move to go and retest that support. So I would likely end up cutting my losses here and then looking for a re-entry. But yeah, that doesn't look so bad. How to activate buy and sell signals. So mine with the Trendmaster, if you go into the settings, I do have this set on the StuTube trading indicator presets. And then it will look like mine, the pink and blue with the sell and buy signals. Do I know what broke structure as well? Is it Trio? Haha, it is. Oh, maybe I should finally buy some. Now that it's done a 2x, but at least there's some actual structure there now. Interesting. Still using the 115 Stuber fib to manage risk on BTC nowadays, or move it closer to the 1 fib? No, I still leave it past the 115. It's actually closer to a 117 if I were to guess. I like to leave some wiggle room. Stu, can you see BTC on the 1 hour? I sure can. And you are correct. I don't really look at the 1 hour. And my reasoning for that is because between the 4 hour and the 5 minute, I feel like I can generally see the market structure I need to see. Because I have the same fib pull on the 4 hour. right? But yeah, the indicators could give you, I guess, a more immediate. Let's see. See what the trend master's saying on the 1 hour, if it'll load. So we do have a lower sell signal, and we're still struggling with that resistance a little bit. That being said, at least they're kind of tapering off, right? It's looking like it's starting to round a little bit. But it is what it is. It is still a downtrend. We still have a lower sell signal. But yeah, no real reason. I don't have anything against the 1 hour. It's just between basically when I'm looking for tighter entries, like more scalpy, I look at the 5 minute. And when kind of looking at the midterm, I look at the 4 hour. It's just preference. Soul, decent looking daily, you say. Good, sir. Not bad, but I also wouldn't say great because there's no actual structure that's broken bullishly. This could very easily just be a pause, and then we end up just nuking today's candle or tomorrow's or over the weekend, whatever. Just because we haven't, because the lower high on the daily for Solana is actually up here, because this would have been where we set a low. We got a little bounce. Our next bounce came in down here. So for me, the daily is in a downtrend unless we're as long as we're below 106 US dollars basically. So yeah, it's possible we see a bounce, but there's nothing that's really invalidated the downtrend for me yet on the daily. Obviously there's this potential setup there, but again, it's not, well, on the 4 hour it's more clear actually. Oh, that's the one I was talking about earlier, I think. But it is close to the first target already. But yeah, that honestly, Solana on the 4 hour looks not too bad to me, just because of how this structure is, right? We have this high, we have a higher high, confirmed higher low, and so far testing the 786 absolutely perfectly. Oh yeah, 4 hour and 1 hour. Yep, totally. I couldn't agree more. And even now, you can see on the more immediate downtrend, since we set this higher high, we would have this low, lower low, confirmed lower high. And we are currently above it. Obviously, this 4 hour candle just started 15, 16 minutes ago, so it's a lot of time. It could still get a fake out, but at least we tested higher than this level. So if anything, if we do pull back, we might see something like this. If we break the downtrend after confirming a higher high, that's a nice sign. I agree. I think that looks good. But again, just understand that the only reason it gets a little risky now is just because we did get that nice reaction off my perfect buy level, and we're getting so close to starting to, well, if I was in a position on that, to starting to take profits there. So it's a little risky to get in now, but I guess as long as you keep that in mind as far as risk management, position sizing, what type of leverage you use, and that sort of thing. Doesn't look too bad. Let me bring up the old trio chart. MXC is probably, oh, it is on Bing X, hey? Man, what a tight range that was. I'm impressed that there's actually candle bodies closing like this, rather than just doing this whole thing. This looks significantly better if you ask me. What's the market cap on that thing? Like 50K? 100K? Might be worth a little punt. I would treat it like a meme coin. I'm not gonna go crazy on it. I would expect it to be a total gamble. But yeah, low market cap, starting to do some things. Interesting. Market cap 80K, perfect. That's my kind of trash right there. I'm in. I'll absolutely I'll have to put some stuff back on MEXC, I guess, but I guess I'll do it. Cool. Yeah. Anyways, guys, I think I am going to wrap up this stream, but just like I said earlier, I will still be around after stopping this, so if there is any last minute questions, you just want to hang, whatever, by all means, I will be here. But yeah, with that, I'm out. Stay safe, my friends.